They taught you that being nice was a virtue. Nobody told you it could also make you an easy target. You've spent months, maybe years, doing everything right, more than right. You are the person who never says no, the one who takes on extra work without complaining, the one who never makes anyone uncomfortable in a meeting, the one who is always available, always reasonable, always easy to deal with. And somehow, someone with half your effort and twice your visibility just got the promotion you wanted. That is not bad luck. That is a pattern. And nobody explained it to you because companies benefit when you do not understand it. At some point, you decided that keeping the peace mattered more than keeping score. You accepted work that was not yours. You adjusted at the first sign of pressure because you did not want to seem difficult. And by every visible measure, you were exactly the employee every company claims to want: committed, flexible, cooperative, low maintenance. And still, for a long time, you have been invisible in the conversations that matter, underpaid compared to what you actually deliver, and quietly ignored by the same people you bent over backward to please. That is not a character flaw. That is a system responding exactly the way it was trained to respond. If any of this sounds familiar, stay with me. This is not motivation. This is a reading of the workplace that very few people are willing to say out loud. If this channel helps you navigate work with more clarity, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stop playing the corporate game blind. You thought building goodwill would protect you. You thought being reliable, helpful, and easy to manage would make you valuable to the people who decide who moves up. You thought your work would speak for itself, and that someone with good judgment would eventually notice. But underneath the surface, something very different was happening. Your unconditional availability was telling the organization that you were not scarce, and what is not scarce does not get protected. It does not get negotiated with. It gets used while it is available, and replaced when something more convenient appears. Your silence in meetings, the silence you thought was professional maturity, was being read as an inability to defend a position under pressure, not because you are incapable, but because power in a room is not earned through technical competence alone. It is earned through presence, and through the willingness to hold a position when someone challenges it. Your lack of complaints was not being read as strength. It was being read as a lack of boundaries. And in a workplace where resources are distributed politically, a lack of boundaries does not create respect. It creates convenience. The organization learned this through every interaction with you, every extra task you accepted, every deadline you absorbed, every meeting where you softened your point too quickly, every yes you gave when you wanted to say no. And once the workplace learns who you are willing to be, changing that story takes more than working harder. Companies do not reward niceness, they consume it. What they tell you when you join sounds harmless. Be collaborative, be flexible, be a team player, don't bring problems. And you did it so well that, little by little, you stopped being seen as a professional with judgment and became something much more useful to the system: available capacity. When you prove that you will absorb extra work without resistance, the organization does not register that as generosity. It registers it as space, free space. And the next time a task needs somewhere to land, it lands on you, because you have trained everyone to expect that no friction will come from your side. That is why the trap is so hard to see. It looks like commitment. It looks like a positive attitude. It even looks good in a performance review. Always willing to help. Great attitude. A true team player. And then, in that same cycle, someone with half your willingness and twice your visibility gets the opportunity you wanted. It was not that you worked badly. It was that you worked without conditions. And in a corporate environment, the person who works without conditions does not build reputation. They build availability. From the inside, those two things can feel almost identical. From above, they are completely different. Availability gets used. Reputation gets considered. That may sound unfair, and it is, but unfairness does not appear out of nowhere. It follows a logic. Maybe you have felt that your position never fully solidifies, no matter how hard you work. Your opinions are heard, but they do not move the room. Your boundaries are treated as flexible, while other people's boundaries are treated as facts. Your time is interrupted more easily. Your objections are taken less seriously. That feeling has a concrete explanation, and it has nothing to do with your talent. Informal status inside a company is not created by titles alone. It is created by behavior. When someone always gives in, always accommodates, always softens their position at the first sign of someone else's discomfort, They are communicating something without saying it directly. They are communicating that their time is negotiable, their needs are secondary, and their opinion can be ignored without consequences. They do not say it with words. They say it with every yes they did not want to give. High-status employees are the ones whose objections are taken seriously, whose calendars are respected, and whose opinions change the room, even when they do not have a higher title than you. Not because they are always smarter, not because they are always more capable, but because the workplace has learned that treating them carelessly comes with friction. Total niceness, the kind with no limits, no resistance, and no willingness to disappoint anyone, is read by the system as low status. And low status does not get promoted. Not always because someone is deliberately trying to harm you, but because power tends to move toward the people the workplace sees as expensive to ignore. That is the part most people miss. The system does not need to hate you to underpay you. It does not need to dislike you to overlook you. It only needs to believe that ignoring you will cost nothing. This is not just an individual injustice. It is the logic of the workplace. And the workplace does not run on intentions. It runs on consequences. Now comes the part very few people are willing to name, because it hurts in a very specific way. People who cannot say no often end up being resented by the very colleagues they helped. On paper, it should work differently. You help someone, so they should feel grateful. You cover for them, so they should respect you. You save them from pressure, so they should remember your name when opportunities come up. But professional gratitude has a very short shelf life when the help was not truly voluntary, when the help was extracted through social pressure, emotional discomfort, and the unspoken rule that you are the one who always says yes. Gratitude does not stay clean for long. Both people feel the imbalance, even if neither person says it out loud. You feel invisible and used. The other person carries, at some level, the weight of an unspoken debt, and that guilt rarely turns into recognition. More often, it turns into distance, into avoidance, into a silence that, over time, starts to look like contempt. Then comes the most confusing moment. The person you helped the most is the person who supports you the least. Not necessarily because they are a bad person, but because the dynamic between you was never equal. It was not colleague to colleague. It was giver and receiver, rescuer and rescued, the one who absorbs and the one who benefits. And that kind of imbalance is rarely resolved through public recognition. More often, it is resolved through distance. You see it in meetings. You see it in conversations about promotions. You see it in the moments when someone could say your name and chooses not to. Understanding this does not change the past, but it changes what you can do next. What comes next is not about becoming cold, rude, difficult, or confrontational. That is the wrong lesson. The real lesson is to introduce calibrated friction. Not drama, not aggression, friction. The kind of friction that communicates that you have judgment, that your time has structure, and that your agreement is not automatic. Think of someone on your team who does not immediately say yes when they are asked to take on something extra. They pause. They ask questions. They give a timeline. They clarify priorities. Nobody calls that a bad attitude. They call it professionalism. They call it judgment. Meanwhile, you replied within 10 minutes, delivered ahead of the deadline, and nobody registered it as merit. They registered it as availability. That person did not necessarily do more work than you, but they built something you stopped building, the perception that their time has a cost. So when someone makes a request, stop answering with immediate yeses. Answer with time. I can review that and confirm by Thursday. That sentence communicates something important. It says your time has structure. It says your attention is not infinitely available. It says your agreement is a decision, not a reflex. When someone presents a position you disagree with, hold your position for at least one exchange before changing it. You do not have to win the debate. You do not have to dominate the room. You only have to make it clear that your position was not a mistake waiting to be corrected. It was a position. When someone offers you work outside your role, ask a question before accepting. How will ownership be distributed? What should I deprioritize to make room for this? Who is accountable for the final decision? These are not hostile questions. These are the kinds of questions high-status professionals ask all the time, without anyone treating them as uncooperative. Because those questions do something important. They make invisible costs visible. They turn your labor from something people assume into something people have to account for. These are not acts of aggression. They are acts of self-definition. They are the difference between being someone whose presence has weight and being someone whose presence is convenient for everyone except herself. The goal is not to become difficult. The goal is to become someone whose yes means something because it is not guaranteed in advance. Being easy to work with is a skill. Being impossible to refuse is a vulnerability. There is a version of professionalism that creates real respect, but it requires you to take up space. It requires you to set conditions. It requires you to stop making yes your default first response. You are not at work to be convenient. You are there to be valuable. And those two things are not the same, even if the workplace spent years making you believe they were. Convenience gets exhausted. Convenience gets assumed. Convenience gets used until it is no longer needed. But well-built value, the kind with boundaries, with a voice, with a position, is much harder to ignore. That is what creates reputation. And in corporate environments, reputation is one of the rarest and most decisive assets you can have. If you made it this far and something in this video helped you name what you have been feeling for a long time, subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications, and leave a like. Here, we will keep talking about the rules nobody puts in the contract, but everyone applies. Because understanding those rules is what separates the person who plays with clarity from the person who keeps playing without even knowing there is a game.